Hi, it's Craig Wilson here, and welcome to the Making the Media podcast. Thanks a lot for joining us for the latest in Season 5. Now, since we started back in 2021, the media industry has gone through turbulent times, coming out of COVID, the boom in streaming platforms and content production, and then the Hollywood strikes and subsequent downturn, which is continuing to have an impact. In the next couple of episodes, we're going to focus a bit on post-production. While it's undoubtedly a creatively stimulating and exciting part of the business, it's also one which has been hugely impacted in the recent past. With warnings of a looming skills crisis, combined with lack of work through a commissioning downturn, it's a sector facing many challenges. In this episode, I'm joined by Emma Butt. She is a dubbing mixer, dialogue and sound effects editor based in London, where she moved after studying and working for several years in her native Ireland. And while she works in different aspects of the industry, she's seen firsthand how hard it can be to move between different sectors. She's also a mentor, helping to support the next generation of creative talent, but she has many concerns for the present and the future. So I began by asking her to assess the current state of post-production.
Not great. And that is not an answer I really enjoy giving. If you look across the sector, I mean, we've had so many facilities closed down within the last year. And actually, I was speaking to a colleague the other day, and it's a lot of facilities outside of London. We are at risk at the moment of getting into a situation where we become London-centric again, and we have nowhere outside in the nations and regions, Scotland especially, I think Manchester as well, Brighton. We have facilities there that have all ceased to exist. And that has then meant that all of those staff members are now becoming freelance. So what used to be a very traditional model of people will be staff and less so freelance, and we'd have a small freelance pool, is now turning the opposite direction because facilities just can't survive. What we're seeing across post-production is, obviously the strikes last year in the States, they had a big impact on the UK industry, but also the commissioning slowdown. That means that what is being commissioned, the budgets are even smaller. So production companies are going to post houses and saying, we haven't got that much money. What's the best deal you can do? It means the post houses are then being even more competitive with each other, undercutting each other quite a lot of the time because they need to get work in, they need to cover their overheads. And then it's just creating this vicious cycle where they're running themselves into the ground. But there is really no money there to actually get the work in the first place, because broadcasting is still kind of like picking itself up. So it's a bit of an interesting time. I wouldn't be surprised if another facility goes down before the end of the year, because there's just not enough work around to sustain how big the post industry had gotten in the last couple of years, especially during the COVID boom. We saw so many pop up and we saw so much work and so many people and freelancers become available and working non-stop, and now all that's dried up. And even speaking to colleagues who are directors, they've been saying that directing gigs that they would go for, that would be just for like second unit, not even first unit, second unit, they can't even get those jobs anymore because directors, high profile directors who would usually be the main director on a series, is now going for a second unit because they've been out of work so much. So it's a fascinating time. I think post needs to reevaluate how it operates, but I'm not too sure what that's going to look like. I don't think anybody is.
And are you seeing, Emma, people leaving the industry because of the current state of things?
Yeah, completely. We are going to lose so much talent at mid-career level, and that obviously has a knock-on effect on diversity and inclusion as well. All of the training bodies like Screen Skills or any of the broadcasters or streamers that provide training schemes or opportunities, they all focus on new talent. And what we really need now is not a focus on new talent, because where is that new talent going to go? There's no work. So what about focusing on the people at mid-career level? And to be honest, even before the state of the industry is now, there was never a focus on mid-career. Like, no one ever thought about, well, if you get to a certain point, especially if you're a freelancer, how do you progress into a HOD role? How do you progress into, a more senior position? You need support, you need structure, you need training, and that doesn't exist, not for post production. And it kind of comes down to the problem of no one really values post production to the same degree as post production professionals do. So training bodies don't see that, they don't see the problems because they're not in it. And we are so hidden and we're so in the background and we are the tail end of a production. And usually by that time, people are exhausted and they just want to get the show over or the production over. They just want to get it delivered. They don't actually see the people in those job roles, and they don't see how much support or training that they might actually need or that they would benefit from. Like, we are massively behind in post production in terms of diversity, inclusion, and equality. We're massively behind in rates. We aren't included in the Pact BEC2 agreement. So we have no protection when it comes to productions about rates or what our minimum should be, getting paid on time. Um, so why would anybody stay in that industry? Why would you, when you're seeing an industry that is in such a bad state, there's barely any work, people are just like, well, what have I worked the last 10, 15, 20 years for? Like, this industry doesn't want me, it doesn't want to help me. I'm going to go and get a job in a different industry that will, and that will support me, and that is going to be reliable, and that I can pay my bills and I'm not worried about my mortgage and I'm not having to, sell off possessions in order to survive. So, yeah, I think we always talk about the skills gap shortage. I think as soon as this kind of like, bad period is over, we're going to face a really bad skills gap shortage in terms of experienced people who have been doing it for quite a long time, who are then able to train up that newer generation that are going to come through, because that mid level isn't going to exist. They're all gone.
Yeah, it does seem almost like a contradiction, doesn't it? That there's just a lot of talk about the skills crisis and a lot of talk about not enough people coming into the industry. But then the flip side of that is there's not enough work, so people already in this industry are leaving. So from your perspective, what needs to be done to really try to encourage more people into the industry? Is it more formal programs? Is it more formal training? What really should be done to try to help this?
The TV industry, factual and entertainment, is the worst hit at the moment. There's barely any docs being made. There's barely any entertainment or factual shows being made. Drama has picked up a little bit more, and so has feature films. But if you're a talented, like, grader, editor, sound engineer in factual and entertainment or documentary, you cannot move into drama or feature films because the people in hiring positions say, well, you don't have those credits, so you're not going to be capable of doing this job. And this comes back to people not understanding post production. It's like, well, actually, they are fully capable of doing those jobs. They can absolutely, like, it's transferable skills, it's transferable knowledge. All of the software is the same, the buttons are the same. The only thing that's slightly different is the workflow, and the workflow can be picked up quite quickly. But because the people in hiring positions don't understand that, they refuse to let people with transferable skills move over. And that's one of the biggest blockages that we have right now, is that people need to be directors, producers, post production supervisors. They all need to get more knowledge about how post production works and about how those craft technical roles work, and understand that they are transferable skills. That will help people stay, because if they know that they can move around, which is what I said at the very start of this about I don't stick to one genre, and I don't, and I've had to work really hard to break that idea from clients that I only do one thing, and they accept now that I don't. But that needs to be more widespread, and then we'll see less people leaving the industry. We also need to see more training. Where is the support for mid-career level? I was speaking to a few people. I'm currently doing a follow-up report to my Lenny Henry Centre diversity report on post-production sound. And I was speaking to one of the people who came forward to be interviewed, and they were saying, well, I'm just about to leave. I'm from a working class background. when I lost my job and I got made redundant, I looked around to see if there was any training courses that I could get, to help me get into drama or get me into long form because I've been in short form for so many years. And they were like, there is nothing there for me to help me try and transfer my skills. And so I'm just left alone. And they've now left the industry. So it's up to the training bodies and it's up to the broadcasters as well, because what are they going to do when no one's left?
Is also part of the challenge about working conditions in post-production as well. Because I know you've done some work at looking at kind of working conditions and how they need to change as well.
Yeah, there's a report coming out at the end of the year, and it's a collaboration between the TV Human Rights Forum, the Film and TV Charity, and Creative Diversity Network, and then myself as a consultant. And some of the titles are basically illegal working practices within post production. And it's funny because the person who's leading the report is actually a lawyer and she has no connection to post production whatsoever. And she was the best person to do this because coming in fresh with no biases or no preconceptions or misconceptions about the industry was great because she could look at it with fresh eyes. And so many times she came back to me and she would have interviews or she'd, be on a recce to a different facility or a different venue. And she'd come back to me and she'd say, I found this information out. Is this like, this seems wrong. This seems illegal. Like, does this actually happen? And I'd be like, I'd laugh and just be like, yeah, that's exactly what goes on. So one of the things is triggering content. So if you're on a production, most likely, if there's anything that would be considered triggering content like suicide or anything graphic, especially if you're doing documentaries, you will always be told in advance. So production have a responsibility to tell you this is what's going to come up. These are going to be the days that we're shooting this content. They'll provide usually mental health support to make sure that you feel okay. In theory, that's meant to come to post production. In theory, the broadcasters assume that production companies, when they choose a facility or even a freelance team, that information and that support is being passed on to post production. And what I think a lot of them haven't realized is that it doesn't. So much of post, people go in and they'll start a show and suddenly there's something really graphic or really triggering on screen that they haven't been warned about. And don't forget, like post production, we work in isolation quite a lot. We work in dark rooms by ourselves. We're not surrounded by people. So you're sat there and you usually have to watch something repeatedly again and again and again until you get a scene right if you're like a grader or a sound editor or a sound mixer. And so you're watching this horrible content continuously and no one's checking up on you. No one's offering you mental health support. No one's asked you if you're okay with this content. You can't really say anything against it because if you do, you can be considered a troublemaker. And especially if you're freelance, you can't have that label because you need to work again. So you don't want to be seen as difficult to a production company or a post house because you want to continue having work in the future. And so you just have to do it. And there's stories in the report that are really troublesome about people feeling the effects of these triggering content years later because no one ever looked after them. So that's one of the things. And then there's also the long hours culture because everything gets so squished in post production. Everybody uses up all of their time, all of their budget on set. And then it gets to this panic in post. And usually our deadlines never move, but the locks will always happen late and we're just expected to pick up the slack and make it work and still deliver because it kind of comes back to the commissioners. The commissioners put a kind of clause in with a lot of production companies that say you have to deliver by a certain date, otherwise you incur a financial penalty. So production companies, by the time they get the post, are really panicked about that. They don't have the money because the budget was never there in the first place. So they put pressure on us to try and deliver to this insane delivery date, but nothing's getting locked on time. And so we end up working insane hours. And again, usually with no overtime, no holiday pay, no lunch breaks. You eat your lunch break you eat your lunch at your desk. You don't get up and move. People end up with back problems. It's just this whole host of issues. And it all comes back down to, if people put proper budgets in place at commissioning level, if commissioners actually watched kind of rough cuts and final cuts on the date that's in the schedule and not later than that, so then that lock doesn't push, that all plays into the terrible conditions in post-production. If all of that was just fixed at the start, we wouldn't end up in this giant panic at the end, and it would be a much more enjoyable experience for everybody, but also it's more productive. Because think about, if you're exhausted, you're not going to give your best work, and we're not able to, because we're under so much pressure at the end, because there's this giant panic from productions, that you can't. You try, but if you're working continuously 14-hour whatever days, you can't give your best work. It's just physically impossible.
There was a question I was going to ask you later on, Emma, but I'll ask it just now, which is, given everything that you've said there, why do it?
Yeah, get asked this a lot. I mean, personally, I love it. And this is all I've ever wanted to do. And I'm doing it since I was 19. And it's a very long time, and I've grown up with it. I think you do become conditioned to it. We just accept that this is the way the industry is. And actually, that is a really, really bad attitude. And we shouldn't. And we should be pushing back and saying, no, this isn't right. We need to do something about it, which is what I'm trying to do. But I think this is a job that you do for the love and for the passion. It's not a job that you do for the money, because the money's never good. Though I think everybody says that about whatever industry you're in. And the hours are terrible, and you struggle to get a social life. But the great thing about post production, and the great thing about sound, is that it's the moment where a show or a film comes to life. And so you get to see like all of the hard work that the clients have put in for, months or years, depending on what the project is. You get to see their faces light up when all of the sound comes together, the picture comes together, the grade comes together. And that's such a lovely feeling to know that you've been a part of that. So that's why I do it. But I would struggle to kind of encourage younger people to do it at the moment.
You talked about encouraging people into the industry there, Emma. And one area that we've looked at in the podcast a little bit before is about a lack of diversity, for example, in journalism. And the fact that a more diverse a newsroom is, then you actually attract different types of stories, and you can tell different types of stories. Do you think enough's done to promote and encourage people from diverse backgrounds into post-production, as opposed to, in journalism that perhaps we've talked about before on the podcast?
Oh, God, no. There's definitely organisations that are trying, like Mama Youth, and I think there's a few others as well in the UK. But there's not enough being done at school level. So I was a mentor with the Media Trust, and it was for kids who had never been to university but wanted to get into media. And they went on this training course. They would look at different types of media, so radio, TV, journalism, a bit of everything. And then they'd be matched with a mentor for a certain period of time. And all of the kids that I met in that program, I would ask them what they wanted to do. And usually it was something TV related, and that's why I got paired with them. But they would always tell me that when they were at school, their guidance counsellors or career counsellors would never encourage them into the media industry. They'd always actually discourage them and tell them that they needed to get a proper job, and they needed to get a normal job. And one in particular, a young girl, she had such a passion for music and sound, and that was all she ever wanted to do. And she was really interested in radio as well. And when she went to her career counsellor, the counsellor said, well, no, your mum's a hairdresser, so that's what you should do. And this was this young black girl who was so passionate, and it was really disheartening to see that that's what the education system was doing to her, and saying, well, no, you're never going to make it, so you need to pick a normal job. Just do what your mum does. And it was a struggle to try and get her confidence back up to feel like she could actually do this and she could pursue a career in it. And so she did start to focus on it a little bit more and was trying to look to get into it. But the education system needs to change. We need to get we need to make people understand that this isn't a risky career, so to speak, depending on what way you go. And it's to focus on those schools from underrepresented backgrounds, from disadvantaged backgrounds, disadvantaged areas, and making sure that they know that this is a career option for them. The other thing is it starts at the top. Why would a young person want to go into a company when they don't see anybody that looks like them? I mean, personally, if I was ever to go back staff, the first thing I'm going to look at is go to the website, go to the staff page, and look and see how many women, how many people from underrepresented backgrounds are working on their sound teams, their grade teams, any of their craft technical teams. And if I don't see any there, I know that's not a company for me. Because why would I want to be in an all male environment as a woman? I've done that. It's horrible. You feel like an outsider. You feel like you don't fit in. You don't feel like you're part of the team. So put that in the reverse and go to a young person. Why would they ever want to come into an industry or come into a company that they don't see themselves reflected? So that needs to change before any young kids from underrepresented backgrounds ever want to come near us.
You've mentioned that you've been engaged in various different types of activities and different sort of research programs within the industry. One program I wanted to ask about was the 4PP program, and to talk a little bit about that and the kind of aims and why you think it's important.
Channel 4 were amazing, and they kind of said, we see the issue, we want to address this, we want to intervene, and they decided to fund it, and that became 4PP. So what it does is it took 6 people from underrepresented backgrounds who were at mid-career level, so not junior, mid-career, and it is kind of designed to intervene and help them step up into HOD roles. So over a 6 cohort, we have a picture editor who is highly skilled in drama, but cannot go beyond assistant editor role, because in order to progress into full-on editor, you have to get a credit. But in order to get a credit, you need someone to take an opportunity on you. And no one wants to take an opportunity on you. And if you are a Black woman, unfortunately, your chances of getting someone to take an opportunity on you are even less. So that is one of our cohort. Another is another brilliant, talented female editor, South Asian editor. And she is coming from, I think, an entertainment background and wants to get into comedy drama. And again, it's the credit thing. So that's blocking her. We've got a re-recording mixer who's been in entertainment who wants to go into drama. Again, credits. So we want to progress him. And it's the same story with all of our cohorts. So what we do is we've provided skills gap training for them. We went and asked them individually, what do you think you're missing? What do you think you need to help you progress? Any of the feedback they gave us, we basically got courses designed or courses tailored to what their needs were. So instead of trying to do what a lot of people do, which is we're going to decide what your skills gap training should be, and you're just going to have to deal with it, we actually went to our cohort and said, tell us what you need and we'll supply it. And we did. So our soundies wanted Dolby Atmos training, so they got 3 days Dolby Atmos training. Our picture cohort, they wanted to learn about all of the latest updates in Avid, actually. So they got a full day on all of the new developments in Avid. They got a day on DaVinci Resolve. They got a day on another piece of software, Premiere Pro. After that, they were given like master classes. So we got in really talented and well-known picture editors, sound editors. We got them a career coach to come in and do one-to-one sessions with them. We got them a mentor for a year. I actually went and asked all of them who their ideal mentor would be and got every single one of them who their mentor was. I'm also a second mentor for them. And then the main part of the program and the kind of key point of it all is that they are then placed on a placement on a Channel 4 production. But it's not your usual placement of just shadowing. So the idea is they shadow for an episode, if it's continuing drama. They see what the job role entails, they see the style of the show, they see how the team works together, and then they take on an episode. And if they're an editor, they edit an episode, or if they're a soundy, they do the dialogue or the sound design or the mix. And at the end of it, they have to be given a full credit. They are fully paid throughout the whole process. So it's at no cost to the production. 4PP cover the cost of their wage. But they also have a new contact list. And so the idea is that they then have that credit that's been blocking them for progressing. So they can then use that on their CV to say, well, actually, I do have a drama editing credit, so give me an opportunity. No one can use that as an excuse that they don't have one. They haven't had to do it out of pocket. They have been, fully paid at a good rate so they can survive, because no one can afford to work for free. And then they've also got a support network behind them, because the idea is that they shouldn't be put into a situation where they don't feel supported. And the production should never feel that there is a risk to their production at any stage. So by having a mentor, by doing the shadowing, it's meant to make everybody feel like this is a really well structured way of doing it. And we're still kind of working on some of the placements, but one of the placements is actually currently taking place, and she's smashing it. And she's gone in. I think production were a little bit hesitant. They were a little bit worried at the start, and now they're just like, this is perfect. Like, she's slotted in so well. She's doing an incredible job. And it was just that hesitation. And she was one that everybody was a little bit nervous about, because she came from news. And if you were in news, trying to get into documentaries, it's impossible, because everybody's like, well, you're only going to ever work in news. You're never going to be able to get into docs. And that's all she wanted to do. And all she'd been told in her career was, you're never leaving news. You're never getting out. And now she's gone into documentary, and they're just like, she's absolutely incredible. And it's because of the fast-paced turnaround of the newsroom and news stories. Her skill set is incredible, but that's what it comes back down to again, is the transferable skills and people not seeing that.
Definitely, transferable skills, I think, is a massive thing within the industry. I mean, Emma, it's clearly a very challenging situation just now, but I feel at least we're finishing on a bit more of a positive note by talking about the kind of program that you're involved in. And Emma, there is a question I ask everyone on the podcast, so I will ask you, which is, what is it, if anything, that keeps you up at night?
The lack of diversity. It's the biggest thing, and it's seeing the industry slightly regress this year has been troubling. We're seeing a lot of the heads of DE&I across all of the broadcasters and streamers basically disappear. The job role doesn't really exist anymore. And they were our best shot of fixing diversity and inclusion issues across the industry, and including post. I'm working on my follow-up to my 2020 report at the moment, and I'd say that's probably what's keeping me up most. Is I don't know yet if the figures are going to be better, worse, or the same. My gut feeling is it's going to be worse, and that's worrying, because they were already terrible. I mean, 6 women out of 60 job roles, and 1 person from a mixed race background. How can you get any worse than that? And I think it is going to be, and I think that's kind of what keeps me up at the moment.
Sobering comments there from Emma, and we'd like to thank her for sharing her views. Check out the show notes, where you can find links to other podcast episodes around the issue of training and diversity within the industry. Now, don't forget to follow the various Avid social channels to get all of the latest updates from us, and you can contact us via any of them or email makingthemedia@avid.com. That's all for now. In our next episode, I'm going to be joined by Gemma Nicholson from the organisation Post Super to discuss their work and new training certifications to help people within the industry. My name is Craig Wilson. Thanks a lot to our producer Matt Diggs, to Emma, and of course to you for listening. Join us next time for more Making the Media.